It's Enemy Sidelines presented by Microsoft. My guest this week, John Boyle. He is the team reporter for the Seattle Seahawks. John, Seahawks are coming off a big win after that 3-game losing stretch. And it just seemed like there was so much in the news about head coach Pete Carroll and Russell Wilson and where the future of the team was headed. But I imagine with the win on Sunday, that's probably quieted the noise a little bit, has it?
A little bit. That was very much needed. It's been a tough season for a number of reasons. And yeah, as you mentioned, 3 losses in a row. They had lost 6 of 7. You have to go back to 2011 before this team had lost 3 games in a row prior to this year. So it's been a tough year, but yeah, much needed, big win, exciting win over a division rival. So, it's an uphill battle from here, but this team feels like it still has a lot to fight for down the stretch.
Yeah, especially with Russell Wilson there at quarterback. We saw him get injured in week 5 and then have the surgery, get the pin put in his finger. And then he made that really cool announcement. I'm a big fan of Succession. So I saw the announcement on Instagram that he was coming back. And then it seemed like it was tough sledding for him in his return. Do you think some of the losses had something to do with maybe him coming back too early, or was the finger still bothering him? And what really changed for him in this past Sunday's win?
Yeah, nobody's going to say he came back too early. And, Pete Carroll has made the point that they had to see enough in practice to let him play. They weren't just going to let him make that decision on his own. So they felt good about him coming back. But sure, I mean, he was only a few weeks, a month removed from surgery when he came back, and he didn't quite look like his usual self. He just missed some throws he doesn't usually miss. He's been a very accurate quarterback throughout his career, and we've seen the last few games prior to this past Sunday where he just misses some throws. And, this past week he was, complete 80% of his passes, and he looked like his old self. So yeah, I think that there is just an element of his finger needs some time to get a little more healed. Also just maybe some rust. I mean, he's never, for 10 seasons, he never missed a game. He never missed a regular season practice even. So, taking a month off in the middle of a season might have just thrown him off a little bit in that regard too, regardless of the injury.
All right. Well, he's got one of the best 1-2 punches in the league with wide receivers Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf. So they have about the same number of targets, but it seems like Metcalf has twice as many touchdowns as Lockett this year. What do you make of the roles in the passing game this season? Is it different than how it's been in the years past?
It's pretty similar to what we saw last year. And it's always interesting with those two. I would hate to deal with them for fantasy football, but I'm not a fantasy guy because you never know which game, who it's going to be. A lot of times it just depends on how teams try to defend them. You'll see a team try to take DK Metcalf away and Lockett has a big game or vice versa. This past game was one of the rare times it's pretty balanced between them. I feel like more often than not, it's one has a big game and the other one doesn't. But yeah, they're over the course of the season, their body of work is pretty similar, other than, as you said, DK Metcalf's kind of been the bigger red zone target, which, makes sense when you look at his physical makeup. He's the big body guy, but both those guys have been great for this franchise for a while now.
All right. Seattle's defense, I don't know if it gets as much attention nationally as it does probably locally, but they shut out the 49ers in the second half of that win, and they're allowing just 20.8 points per game, which is the third fewest in the NFL. So throughout the losses, what's been the most impressive part about this defense? It seems like they pretty much stayed consistent throughout the season.
Yeah, they started off a little rough. They gave up, I think it was over 30 points in back-to-back losses early in the year, and they gave up a lot of yards early. So it's funny, you look at I think they're still like 31st in yards allowed, but a lot of that came early, and they've been really impressive, especially when you consider with the offensive struggles, that defense has been on the field a ton. The Seahawks have run the fewest plays in the NFL. They won time of possession against San Francisco for the first time all season. They've had the better time of possession. So it's been a tough battle for the defense just in terms of how much they're on the field. But as you said, they're pretty good in the scoring defense. They've been good in the red zone all year. They've been good on third down. So hats off to that group because they've had some tough situations with the offense struggling, and they keep battling, and they've kept them in a lot of games, even in all these losses. So that's kind of become, we all came in the season thinking Russell Wilson, this offense would be what carries the team, but the defense has really been more the strength of late.
All right. Well, the Texans will face Adrian Peterson for the second time this year. The last time they faced him, he was playing for the Titans. So after getting released, the Seahawks picked him up, put him on their practice squad. And last week he scored a touchdown. So what do you envision for Adrian Peterson this week? Maybe a bigger role, or does he take a step back? Does Alex Collins come back into the fold? What do you make of this run game when they face the Texans?
Yeah, we'll have to see. You mentioned Alex Collins. That'll be kind of the question mark of, he's been playing through kind of a groin abdominal injury situation for much of the season since he took over that starting job from Chris Carson, who's out for the year. So Pete Carroll did say, Collins getting the week off finally to rest might help him get back. But I think they do like, Adrian Peterson. I mean, look, he's not 2015 or 2012 Adrian Peterson at this point, but he does still have kind of a physical presence that maybe they don't have in that backfield without Chris Carson. So we'll have to wait and see who all is available. They like what they saw at Rashad Penny last week in a bigger role. So it's probably going to be a little mix and match, but I would imagine we might see Peterson in some capacity once again.
All right, so the Seahawks will face Justin Britt for the first time, not in a Seahawks uniform, which Texans fans, not a lot to be super excited about this year, but we do like what we've seen out of Justin Britt so far, even in the offseason and in training camp. He just came off IR, so he's back in the starting lineup. What stands out to you about Britt from the years that you've covered him when he was with the Seahawks?
Yeah, I mean, he was a guy that really developed into a leader and just kind of a really steady presence on that offensive line. He moved around a bunch early in his career. He started his career as a tackle. They tried him at guard, and he really found a home at center. And then, unfortunately, the knee injury cut short his time here, and it didn't work out to bring him back free agency wise. But really cool to see him back starting. He was a guy that, personally is just a locker room presence for the media. He was great to deal with, always a very accountable guy who would, take any questions people had. And yeah, just good dude, and glad to see he's doing well out there.
All right. What about for yourself? What are some of the storylines you'll be covering for this week's game?
Yeah, I mean, first and foremost, to me, it's all about, can this offense kind of build off the progress it showed? As I kind of referenced earlier, it had been a real struggle for a while for the offense, really dating back to before Russell Wilson got hurt, but then especially after the injury. So they started slowly against the 49ers last week, but then really picked it up. They had 3 touchdown drives and really should have probably had 5 touchdowns, but they turned it over twice right near the goal line. So if the offense can, build off that, and Russell Wilson once again looks like he did, all of a sudden you start looking at this team with the defense playing how it has been, and they do look really dangerous, like a team that might be able to go on a run.
All right, good stuff. John Boyle, team reporter for the Seattle Seahawks. John, thanks so much for the time, and we'll look forward to seeing you here on Sunday.
Thanks for having me. Looking forward to the trip out there.
Thanks for watching, and go Texans! Like, subscribe, and ring the bell for new content.